Hello, my friends. This is Brother Des coming to you today from the Prophetic Bible teachings for another Sunday. But we have moved into the month of August. And today's teaching, as promised, will be on part 6 and 7 of the teachings that we've been looking at from this passage in Revelation. So let's move on. We promise that we'll look at Zechariah's prediction of Israel after the Great Tribulation. And so then this last part will be how God judges with thundering and lightning and hail and all the rest of it. Okay? So as we look at Zechariah's prediction of Israel after the Great Tribulation, note his prediction. Zechariah 14:16 through 21. He predicts that during the millennial kingdom, people will come to Jerusalem and will worship the King, the Lord of hosts. What is this prophet predicting? What is it? This is about the millennium. Let me explain some things. The rapture will take place. Okay? And then after the rapture, we find the saints, those from the church, will go before the judgment seat of Christ. And they will receive awards, crowns. And all these activities in heaven that we look at. Okay? And we see 24 elders representing the Old Testament believers and the New Testament believers, those who died before. Okay? But we find the resurrections are different, and which we'll explain a little later on. But then what's going to happen? The believer's going to come back with Christ during the second coming. The second coming is not the rapture. That's when he comes back with his saints and his armies, and he will defeat the Antichrist, the beast, and the false prophet, and all those who will be fighting against him as he comes back. Then we find the judgment with the lamb, of the goats and the lamb you've been listening to way back. And there he will invite people who are not born again into the millennial age. And the Jewish people will also be there, the remnant. And what will happen? We find later on, as I'll be sharing, he'll set up all these blessings that they had to have. And we believers will be living in the new place on earth. Not, we would be there in the kingdom. And in that kingdom would come forth the tribulation saints. And the Old Testament saints will all be now, everybody resurrected. And they are all saints. And so the prophet now is not looking at the section of the believers that were ruling and reigning with Jesus, but he's looking at Israel itself in the blessings that they will have on the earth with all what they were promised. So this brings us to the 1,000-year reign where God will allow the remnant of Israel to inherit the long-promised blessings. Therefore, he will fulfill those covenants. So let's look at them. The Abrahamic covenant. God promised Abraham to make his descendants a great nation, to bless them, and to give them the land of Canaan as an everlasting, notice, everlasting possession. Genesis 12, 1 through 3, 15, 18 through 21, and 17, 1 through 8. Then second, we find the Palestinian covenant. And in that, sometimes the Palestinian covenant, this is God's reaffirming or reaffirmation that the land of Israel would belong to his people. promising both restoration and future possession after their disobedience and exile, according to Deuteronomy 29, 1 through 30, 1 to the end, and then to 30 in verse 10. Then we come to the Davidic covenant. God promised King David that his lineage will continue forever and that the Messiah would come from his descendants, establishing an everlasting kingdom. 2 Samuel 7, 12 through 16, Psalm 89, 3 through 4. And then we come to the new covenant, God's commitment, prophesied through Jeremiah and fulfilled in Jesus Christ, to write his law on the hearts of his people, to forgive their sins and to grant them ultimate relationship with him. Jeremiah 31, 31 through 34, Ezekiel 36, 26 through 28, and Luke 22 and verse 20. All these covenants find their ultimate fulfillment during the millennial kingdom. That's on earth. That's after the rapture. When the second coming takes place, this kingdom will be set up. And God will graciously restore Israel, bestow the blessings promised to Abraham, secure their land forever, establish the Messiah's reign, and renew their hearts. So as we move on, there will be, as prophesied by the prophet, there will be the Feast of Tabernacles that Zechariah is predicting. You say, what's the Feast of Tabernacles? Well, it's known as Sukkot in the Hebrew. It is a major Jewish festival celebrated in fall. It's one of the three pilgrimage festivals, along with the Passover and Pentecost, and during which the ancient Israelites were commanded to journey to Jerusalem to worship at the temple. Lasts for 7 days. Biblical origin, Leviticus 23, 33 through 43. God instructs Israel to observe this day and set out booths, which in the Hebrew is Sukkot, for 7 days. What about the significance? It was remembrance, to remember God's faithfulness, thanksgiving, to thank God for what he has done and allow the crops and the gratitude of how he blessed the land. Joy and rejoicing, season of rejoicing it is called, with music and communal gathering and emphasizing the joy of God and blessings. And then Messiah hope, messianic hope. For many, the Feast of Tabernacles point forward in time, when according to the prophetic writings, all nations will come to worship God in Jerusalem. See Zechariah 14, 16 through 19. So as we move on here, on that day, according to Zechariah, there will be bells on horses, holiness unto the Lord, and the posts of the Lord's house shall be like the bowls before the altar of God. It means there will be a physical temple of Israel, the Lord's house. Amen. Amen. You say, that's all we can say about it. But remember this, before these events, God will carry out his judgments with thunderings, lightnings, earthquakes, hail, as noted in Revelation 11:19. Note, the Bible indicates that the actions with the weather are directly related to God and his power. I remember even when I was a boy and it was thundering, my grandmother used to say, God is speaking. It's amazing. And we see God demonstrates his power with lightning, voices, thunder, earthquake, and hail. Israel will go through much in the great tribulation, but in the end, God will judge Satan and cast him first for 1,000 years into the bottomless pit, and then finally in Revelation to the lake that burns with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. We are beginning to see some of these thunderings and lightnings and earthquakes take place even today, friends. The time is short. It won't be long. One day, the trumpet will sound, and the believers of Jesus Christ will be raptured to meet the Lord in the air. Be ready. For such an hour as you think not, he shall repair. He shall appear. In the next teaching, we will move into the personalities that will emerge from the seventh trumpet. This is the last trumpet. Seventh trumpet. Just before the bowl, the bowls with all the judgments coming out during the Great Tribulation period. But as we look at lessons from this portion today, we see insights from Zechariah, the covenants, and Revelation 11:19. The first lesson is God's faithfulness and his promises. Bear in mind, God's covenant blessings made to Abraham, reaffirmed to Israel, extended through David, and fulfilled in Jesus Christ will ultimately come to pass. The teaching highlights that these promises are not just historical, but living assurances that will find their fulfillments during the millennial kingdom. God's faithfulness, as shown in Abrahamic, land, Davidic, and New Covenants, forms the unshakable foundation of prophetic hope. The second lesson, restoration and blessing for Israel. Zechariah's prophecy points to a future era when the remnant of Israel will inherit the blessing promised many years ago. The teaching underscores that after trials and judgment, God will restore Israel, allowing them to receive the land, peace, and relationship with God that were covenant to their ancestors. You say, what about other people? Well, we have Jesus Christ. Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. So everybody else, we have a way also through Jesus Christ. Lesson number 3. The importance and meaning of the Feast of Tabernacle. We said it embodies God's faithfulness and provision, commemorating the Israeli wilderness journey, also a time of thanksgiving and joy. And then lesson number 4, the reality and centrality of God's heavenly temple. Revelation 11:19 reveals that God's temple in heaven is real and open, with the Ark of Covenant at its center. It symbolizes the enduring importance of God's presence and his promises. And we find the opening of the temple is a dramatic reminder that God's glory is not confined to earth, but is fully manifested in his heavenly realm and all that we have that he has created. Lesson number 5. God's supreme power of judgment, the manifestation of lightning and thunder and earthquakes, hail, are not random acts of nature, but demonstrations. People talk about Mother Nature. It's demonstrations of God's authority over both the natural and spiritual world. These dramatic signs serve as a call to reverence and awe, warning that God's judgments are real and will soon fully be revealed. So we come to lesson 6, the urgency of spiritual readiness. The teaching concludes with a call for preparedness. A time is short, and the coming of Christ could happen at any moment. Believers are encouraged to remain watchful, steadfast in faith, and ready to meet Christ when he returns. And friends, let's remember, God is faithful to all his promises and covenants. Israel's restoration and blessings are assured in God's plan. Festivals like Sukkot points to God's desire for fellowship with humanity. Heaven's temple open, a sign that God's presence and promises endure. God's power is manifested both blessings and judgment. We must be spiritually prepared for Christ's imminent return. Friends, remember, Jesus Christ died that all may have access, assurance, and unwavering divine faithfulness. If you have never invited him into your life, do it today. Ask him to come in right now and come into your life. Amen? Amen. And like I always say, to assist you with prophecy, get these books, The Common Great Tribulation on Earth, Global Warming or God's Warning, a prophetic explanation for the strange and unusual activities in the sky, on the land, in the waters, and with the weather, like you see. And then the book of Revelation, explained for the times in which we live. All books are on Amazon, even more books. I have about 12 or so books on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. Get your copies. I'm the author, Desmond Michael Coverley. It's under my name. Get yours today and share it with friends. In the next prophetic teaching, I'll be teaching or presenting the personalities of the seventh trumpet judgment. Have a great day and God's blessing on you and your family. This is Brother Des. My handle, @BroDes357. Blessings. Amen.